Welcome to the 17th episode of the Rain Race Podcast. We have a pretty exciting one in store for you guys today. We have Kevin Rollins and David Land guest hosting. We're going to be talking about the 2019 IndyCar schedule, IMSA prototype news and regulations, and we're going to round it all off with some IndyCar recaps from Toronto. I'm Chris Aurelio. This is Rain Race. Let's go. Episode 17 of the Rain Race Podcast here, joined alongside a trio of guys. We've got Kyle Cuthbertson.
What's up?
Kevin Rollins.
What's up?
And David Land.
I'm big.
All right, you're the only one here with a unique intro there, so kudos to you. But we've got a couple different news stories to go over today. Fortunately, we don't have like 100 recaps like we did in episode 16, so that'll be pretty short. But we do have a nice prototype debate, which will probably just be Kevin and David for like 90% of it.
Oh, that's gonna be good.
But yeah, we're gonna jump right into the news first. Obviously, probably the biggest story coming out of the previous week would be IndyCar's return to Laguna Seca in 2019, and that'll actually be the finale race. So their first return to Laguna Seca since, David, this is where you come in and tell me?
2004.
Okay. All right, I was way off. I was going to say 90-something, but... they're returning to Laguna Seca, and actually this is kind of interesting because I was talking to Kyle and, in a group chat a week before saying IndyCar's return to Laguna Seca really wouldn't be all that it's hyped up to be. And then, lo and behold, the week after that, they announced that it's returning. And actually replacing Sonoma, which is a track that a lot of people consider quite a boring race. So we're going to get some hot takes on this one, starting off with Kyle. Your opinions on the return of Laguna Seca?
I'm honestly disappointed that we couldn't have a race at Sonoma and Laguna Seca, but I think Laguna Seca is honestly going to be another. It's not going to be the best race, but I'd rather see a boring race at Laguna Seca than a boring race at Sonoma, to be honest. So I think it's gonna be an interesting weekend. It's Laguna Seca is one of those tracks that it's an overall classic. It ranks up there with Road America across the country and Road Atlanta and all of Mid Ohio. It's definitely up there with all the historic tracks. It's definitely in one of the great American tracks that I think anyone outside the U.S. would want to race on. So it's better than Sonoma, but I don't think it's going to be the best race of the season, to be quite honest. But it is what it is.
Kevin, your opinions on this?
They finally put it out of its misery, thank God. The only thing that Sonoma had going for it was the fact that it was the championship race. That was it. That's all they could promote. But now you actually have a race with actual hype behind it and with history there. Good. Now the racing, I'm still kind of skeptical how it's going to play out, but that's not an immediate issue.
And lastly, David, your thoughts on this?
I tend to agree with Kyle, and I'll even go a little bit further and say I'm getting a bit of Phoenix vibes from this whole thing. I kind of feel like in a lot of ways IndyCar is setting this race up to fail. Namely because they're putting it as a season finale. Okay, I'll give it a kind of a half thumbs up. I would have preferred Gateway, but Gateway doesn't want to change their date. I don't blame them. They got a huge crowd last year. Whatever. It's going to be on the big NBC, according to Mark Miles. So you would assume that the ratings will be okay. But as Kyle said, it's maybe not going to be a very exciting race. And again, Phoenix vibes here in terms of a very hyped venue. A lot of classic races used to take place there. And yet going back there after 20 years or 15 years in both cases, actually, I think they both left around 2004 from the schedule the first time. I'm just worried about this. And not to mention that IMSA is going to run a race 2 weeks before?
I thought it was the week before.
Yeah, that's called splitting the fan base right there. That's
should have done a doubleheader with IMSA.
Yeah, but IMSA's got their head, and we're going to get into this. IMSA's got their head too far up their own ass to want to do a doubleheader because they think, and in some ways rightly so, that they should be headlining events. But I mean, it's Laguna Seca. It's not like you're asking IndyCar to come, run on the Sunday of Petit Le Mans. This is not a big event for them. It would only be bigger if both IndyCar and IMSA were there, but, whatever.
Believe it or not, David, I actually agree with you. The problem with IMSA is they don't want to do double headers anymore because they always play second seat, and there's nothing wrong with that because if you have an IndyCar fan base that's going to be there anyways, and they'll say, screw it, we'll watch this race too, then you get fans from the IndyCar fan base by putting on a great show.
Yeah, and you don't think like the fans and sponsors, there's a lot of crossover. The teams crossover, for God's sakes. Acura, Honda, Honda and Chevrolet, they're in both series. There's several sponsors that cross over, as Sirius XM is one of them. Lots of the oil and gas companies.
As a whole.
Yeah. Penske.
Yeah.
Rahal.
Ganassi.
I always remember ALMS and at Mid-Ohio in the IndyCar crossover, the doubleheader was always really cool, and it definitely added to the event. And it definitely added to the value of the ticket you were buying when you got 2 races in one weekend. So,
and ALMS was arguably bigger than IMSA is now then. So it's like, it's confusing to me.
I pretty much agree with all the points that were thrown around here. The only last thing I'm going to add, and if you know me at all, you know I'm going to say it, that they should ditch double points. But that's a whole discussion for another day.
I think it's going away. I think it's eventually going to go away. They've already cut the points from the qualifying, or they've cut the amount of points they give for the Indy 500 qualifying. And if they're cutting something from the Indy 500, you would think that they would have the brains to cut the double points. They should get rid of them, just full stop too. I don't think it should be for the Indy 500 either, to be honest with you.
Yeah. Same. Yeah, you know me, I'm probably going to argue that until the day I die because I'm a purist when it comes to this stuff. But, that's
I'm
my
okay
only...
with double points for the Indy 500. Honestly, I'm okay.
If you're giving double points for the Indy 500, give them at Pocono too, because if you're gonna make it a 500-mile thing, then make it a 500-mile thing. But if you're just gonna, the Indy 500 is valuable already. It's stupid.
It's kind of dumb when Ed Carpenter jumps to like 13th in the points after the Indy 500.
Oh God, don't get me started on that one.
Moving on, though, sticking on the topic of IndyCar, we're going to be jumping to IndyCar's future at Texas. Just been a couple discussions going on. Texas Motor Speedway has been saying that they want to renew their post-Indy 500 event. But IndyCar has also been in some preliminary talks with COTA, should Texas end up leaving. So, again, we're going to start off with Kyle here. Opinions on... First off, which track you'd rather see? I'm going to say 95% is Texas Motor Speedway. But what could come from all these discussions going on with Inside IndyCar?
As always, I'd rather see both races on the schedule. I think Eddie Gossage just has his head up his ass on this one. I don't understand why we can't have 2 races in Texas. If you don't put them too close together, it shouldn't be a problem. And I don't get why Eddie Gossage has a problem with COTA. He's had a problem with COTA ever since it's been built, from what I've heard.
You know why? Because they spent more money than he did to build that track.
Exactly. That's why. Eddie Gossage has his head up his own ass. And then he wants the race to be after the Indy 500. Some would argue, we need back-to-back ovals. But, Detroit is having their own problems of their own, so you're not going to ask Detroit to move their date. So just stick to what you got and try to promote the event that you got, and don't complain and say... I saw on Twitter, Eddie Gossage, can't talk, basically blamed not being after the 500 for his poor attendance. He just got his head up his own ass, and he needs to just promote the event and get people in the stands. I've seen Texas Motor Speedway put out some ticket deals that look very intriguing. They just need to do more promoting for it. Both races could work, and, Eddie Gossage just needs to get ahead of his ass and make it happen.
Should I put a counter on the bottom of the screen for how many times people say get their head out of their ass?
Yes.
We're probably up in the dozens by now.
And 11 of those were Kyle.
Yes.
Yeah. But yeah, moving on. Kevin, your thoughts on this?
I would, hands down, I would choose Texas. Circuit of the Americas, I really don't think it would be a good IndyCar race at all.
COTA is kind of a meme. I think everybody hates it, and I've kind of contributed to this because I keep making fun of COTA all the time. It's not that bad. I think it would be a bad place for IndyCar. frankly, because there's just way, way, way too much runoff. Way too much runoff. And IndyCar isn't very good at policing rules in general. And if you start bringing track limits into a question, I mean, what happens? Well, here's the thing. Max Chilton once ran like 3 laps at Long Beach, completely cut the course, and they gave him a warning and said, stop doing that. Like, imagine what would happen at COTA. I think it would just be an absolute shit show. It wouldn't be that entertaining. I mean, it'd probably be entertaining, but it would be entertaining for the bad reasons. I think COTA's
IMSA in 2014, where they just kept abusing it, and there's nothing.
Well, they literally just said you can start using like the exit. I think it's like the second to last corner where it's one of the tougher corners on the track, and they just said, "Oh, yeah, you can just use all that runoff out there to make the corner easier." That was kind of stupid, but my whole point about COTA is like there's probably 75% of the track that's good. It's that Mickey Mouse second sector that's really like as soon as you get off of the straightaway and pretty much all the way leading up to the triple apex corner, which I like quite a bit, all that crap I would just cut out. I would just lengthen the straightaway a little bit, do a 90-degree corner into that triple apex, and then you'd probably have a pretty good circuit. But you know, it's all the bad things of a Herman Tilke track. Somebody tweeted at me when I kind of attacked COTA on Twitter, and I tend to agree with them. It's kind of got all the copycat stuff, the Mickey Mouse second sector, the stupidly long straightaway with not a really good passing opportunity at the end of it. It's just, it's pretty much everything bad. But there are some good stuff. Like the whole first sector is really good. Nice elevation changes, nice fast corners. It's a shame that the whole track isn't like that.
By the way, I'd like to point out that the crap from IMSA 2014 at COTA is Gustavo Yakimen's fault.
Well, what isn't an IMSA these days?
It always ends up, the IndyCar talk always ends up ending with something IMSA.
Yeah.
Well, that's because you have 2 sports car fanatics over here.
Well, we're about to give you probably a good half an hour to debate here in like 10 minutes. So just
that's gonna be amazing because we already started this debate.
Stop hyping it up, or else it's gonna be terrible.
Well, actually, the thing I want to talk about a little more is TMS a race we should be protecting on the schedule?
Yes.
Because I know they've had their good
so
races, they've had their
long.
great races. Actually, they've had their poor races as well. But I mean, David, you talked about COTA quite a bit. But do you think that TMS is a race that we need to preserve on the IndyCar calendar the way it is?
Yeah, well, yes, to a certain extent. Again, I think, to use a phrase, Eddie Gossage needs to get his head out of his ass.
Yeah.
Because, well, here's the thing. It's like, he needs to realize that it's never going to be a pack race again. Unless it is a pack race again. Because it seems like IndyCar changes their mind every year whether they want that race to be a pack race or not. But it's not going to be that again, so stop promoting it like that. And start... I think there's probably some changes that could be made. Maybe lengthen the race a little bit. Why not a 500-miler there? Give something or have something to sell about Texas that's maybe not the crash and bash them, throw cars into the catch fence constantly racing. I would say that maybe think about making it the season finale. I think Eddie has made it clear that he wants it to be a major part of the championship, meaning after Indianapolis directly or the season finale, which it used to be back in the early days of the IRL. They actually went to Texas twice. So I don't know. I think it should stay, but I think we need to taper our expectations about Texas. I think kind of the myth has been built up about the race, and it almost never lives up to the hype that we kind of give it.
I think another thing in there is how ridiculous the IndyCar marketing is and why they need to stop marketing.
One car airport!
Exactly. If you're going to market all this 4-wide pack racing, then give them the 4-wide pack racing. Come on, what do you...
well, here's another thing I will say about Texas. Here's another thing I will say about Texas. It is a unique venue to IndyCar. There isn't another 1.5-mile track on the schedule at the present time. So I think for the variety of the schedule, the marketability of saying these are the most diverse racing drivers in the entire world, you need to keep that race on the schedule. just because of that. Now, if you add a Homestead, you add a Kentucky, maybe we can start talking about maybe Texas doesn't need to be there. But at the same time, Texas is unique to those other 1.5 milers I just mentioned. So I don't know. And it's traditional too, which, tradition doesn't mean a whole lot in modern IndyCar anymore, but meh.
Well, if we had Rob Miller in here, we'd be saying we need to save these ovals, okay? We can't be talking about getting rid of these ovals.
Yeah, but Robin Miller contradicts himself all the time. He'd also be talking about how we can't be spending $3 million every time we go to Texas because we wreck 15 cars. It's like.
I mean, I do agree that we do need a few more ovals on the schedule, but
All right, pretty well summed up, yeah. I mean, I agree with a lot of the points that were thrown around. I think that Texas should be a race that should stay for, tradition's sake, and it's not the worst race on the schedule. I personally don't think COTA would be that good for IndyCar. I think that it's obviously designed as a Formula One track, and IndyCar, from recent history, seems to suit the more traditional American old school style circuits a lot better. So I don't think that would be a race that's quite what it could be hyped up to be. But that's just my 5 cents on that whole situation. Moving off of IndyCar, though, we're going to be talking about, the first thing we're going to talk about IMSA here is Tequila Patron leaving IMSA, not only ESM's partnership, the sponsorship that they have for Extreme Speed, but they're also going to be leaving IMSA as a corporate sponsor as well. So, again, round table here, starting off with Kyle. What are your thoughts on this? I'd say more on the ESM side of things, since that'll probably have the larger impact.
I just really hope that they can gain another sponsor and get the funding to keep going on. And definitely one of the sad. I think we were more sad because of how freaking awesome the livery was, and how iconic the Tequila Patron cars were. And it's definitely going to be missed on track. And I hope ESM can find something else that kind of fits their brand and fits them and IMSA, and hopefully they can keep moving on.
So from the two different points of views, you got the sponsor and then you got the team. From the sponsor side, we sort of seen it coming once the changed ownership and Ed Brown lost a giant portion of his say-so in the company. We already knew they were kind of trying to cut back on their sponsorships. We knew for a while that they weren't going to sponsor the North American Endurance Championship anymore. They cut ties with the NHRA team that they were sponsoring. But this is the big one because this was really their big investment. Tequila Patron literally carried the team. They developed the Nissan DPI because, of course, Nissan didn't do much. And from the team aspect, I don't think they're going to have an issue getting a sponsor. The reason I say that is they are one of the most successful teams in IMSA as of late, especially on the races that people really pay attention to. Because, you have these fans that really just sort of watch the endurance races, the Rolex 24, the 12 Hours of Sebring, and they could give two craps about the rest of the schedule. And ESM has been dominant in those races in the last couple of years. So I don't think they're going to have an issue finding a sponsor. Hell, they had to go without Tequila Patron at the runs at Le Mans when, because you can't have alcohol sponsors on the cars at Le Mans. So they got like Paul Mitchell, and they even had the Rolling Stones one year, which was weird. So I don't think they're going to have a problem finding a sponsor. It's just how much funding they're going to get out of that sponsor.
The question also is that if Nismo steps up, I know we were talking before this episode, if Nismo steps up and increases some funding to that team of their own, because right now they pretty much do nothing. They just give ESM the rights to use a Nissan bodywork.
The whole Nissan ESM partnership was kind of brought together out of spite for Honda because ESM thought they were getting screwed over by Honda in favor of Mike Shank Racing back in 2016. And obviously ESM started using Nissan because at the time you could actually have, different engine manufacturers in P2, and that was the engine to have in WEC where they were competing at full time. And now, really, they're only in IMSA with prototype racing. because obviously you got the Gibson engine, which is the spec engine in WEC. I'd like to see them step up. I mean, they had a huge presence in prototype sports car racing back in, like, say, Le Mans 2014 and so on when they was in P2. I'd like to see them step up their involvement, not quite to that level where they have Aero Electronics size hospitalities, but at least fund the guys who are carrying your brand in IMSA.
I'm also sad that I didn't get to go to the Tequila Patron bar when I was 21. It's disappointing.
Yeah, well, you got a couple years left there, Junior.
Damn it, oh my God, I was 1 year off, too.
Exactly.
All right, lastly, David, your thoughts on this whole situation?
So to sum up real quick, Patron, in terms of a company, I know a lot of it was kind of a vanity project by Ed Brown to kind of be in racing and drive himself, and I don't blame him at all for that. But it created one of the most iconic liveries, probably the second best like modern racing livery behind Red Bull, I would say. One of those we're going to kind of look at 20 years from now and go, damn, that was awesome. You know, we'll see throwbacks to it. And, you know, I wouldn't be surprised if they kind of pull a Martini, where Martini kind of left racing for a little while and then they came back. So I feel like Patron is going to realize the value of that to their brand. And I think they will be back because there is such a following behind them. Think about some of the iconic cars that carried that livery, particularly the 2008 ARX that was driven by Brabham and Sharp, and such a cool thing and such a staple for IMSA. So they did so much for the sport as well. So for the future of the program, I see this going one of two ways, and I think both ways end with Patron staying but cutting back to a one-car program. Number one, I think they will keep the DPI. I think it will be funded jointly by Nissan and Nismo. I think that'll be a big PR move. They'll be like, wow, look, we saved your favorite team, everybody. Come buy a Nissan. But in reality, they're not going to be contributing that much extra to the program because it will be back to a one-car effort. And I think most of the funding will probably come from Daytona Beach. We've had some instances in the past of teams, particularly prototype teams, being funded. 3 of the 4 Cadillac teams that are not named Wayne Taylor have had funding from NASCAR and IMSA before to keep them afloat in various points during the Grand Am and IMSA days. So I don't think that would be out of the ordinary. I think it's in IMSA's best interest to keep that particular DPI car on the grid, especially considering their posturing currently with the ACO. They've got to make that class look strong. And I think you don't look like you have a very strong class if you start losing manufacturers. Number 2, I think they could just go to a base Ligier Gibson. We've seen that combination can be competitive. Now, where the funding would come from, I don't know. Would they have to take a funded driver? Would they have to hire a Yakiman or somebody to make that car work or come to the track? I don't know. But I think we'll see them stick around. I hope that they stick around because I think everybody kind of likes them. And certainly losing a prototype team, particularly one as strong as ESM, would be a huge blow to IMSA. So I hope they stick around.
Okay, I have a theory. I could actually see there being a Red Bull ESM car.
I don't.
The reason I say that. The reason I say that.
I don't see that.
They have a working relationship with Brendan Hartley.
Nope.
No, I don't see this happening.
I could see that.
That's a bigger conspiracy than any conspiracy.
If Hartley goes anywhere, it's going to be Ganassi IndyCar. That's the only place I see him going outside of Toro Rosso.
Yeah, that's still like.
I mean, he has a working relationship with ESM. He raced there last year. He did very well, minus the part where he hit the wall at Daytona.
Yeah, but he's also raced for Starworks, and we're not talking about him racing for the Land Audi at any point. You know, it's like.
But Starworks is pretty much a afterthought at this point. And Land Audi is a factory Audi-supported effort.
We make fun of David's conspiracies, and yet, Kevin.
Yeah,
I don't know, man. You're doing a lot of deep digging on that one. I don't really see it happening, but...
I mean...
Hey, if it does happen, I'm leaving this in the episode. And if it does happen, then Congratulations, you're
I'm
a
a genius.
top-class conspiracy
Yeah, you're freaking
theorist.
genius if you got that one right.
Also, I could see them getting some funding from Onrook Automotive as well.
Oh, yeah. If they don't already have funding from them, I'd be very surprised.
I mean, I can see Onrook stepping up the game because guess what? Ligiers around the world, I mean, they're doing better, but they're still not doing that great.
Yeah,
And
but does a DPI car sell Ligier P2 cars? I would question
the
that.
chassis can actually do something.
Sure, but I think mainly, and we're going to get into this, don't worry, but I think most of the problem for the other P2 cars is the fact that they're paired with that freaking Gibson engine, which only works with one chassis, essentially.
Yeah, well, that again, I'm saving all my heavy ammunition for that argument.
I just want to quickly add a footnote to what David was talking about. First off, I do think we could see ESM drop to a one-car team. In fact, I think that that's the more probable thing that'll happen for next year. But also, you were talking about how Ed Brown was pretty much the guy who brought this whole thing to sports car racing. Obviously, Ed Brown was a major... He was the owner of Tequila Patron, I believe, if not the CEO.
One of the co-founders, and ironically, the other co-founder is Alexa DeJoria's dad, and that's why that funny car was sponsored. But anyway, go on.
So he was the guy who was a part of the whole IMSA deal, obviously being a sports car racing fan himself. The reason why Tequila Patron is pulling their sports car racing sponsorship, at least for now, is because earlier in the year they were bought out by Bacardi. So now Ed Brown is kind of out of that top level position where he gets to make these decisions, and it's up to Bacardi at this point.
Ceremonious role.
Yeah. So I
He's
mean,
getting paid.
it doesn't take a genius to figure out that that's why that's why Tequila Patron is dropping their sponsorship. But that's really just all I had to add on that topic. And the last thing I want to talk about quickly before we move on to the great battle war of 2018, July 19th, whatever you want to call it, is LMP1 equivalents of technology. Because if you watch Le Mans and you watch Spa, you would see that the hybrids pulled away like never before, pretty much. At least never in the WEC era of things. And the new goal that they've set for Silverstone onwards, at least I'm hoping it's for Silverstone onwards, is that they want to reduce that pace deficit between the hybrids and privateers to 0%. I believe previously they said they wanted to get half a second a lap at Le Mans. That wasn't the case at all, so we're going to have to take this new word with a grain of salt on its own. But what we do know is that the privateers have gotten a fuel flow increase from 108 kilograms an hour to 115 kilograms an hour. The fuel flow restrictor that they had on the fuel hoses during the pit stops has been eliminated pretty much, so they'll be refueling in the same time as the hybrids. They're not going to have that 5-second drop in pit stop times compared to the hybrids. And lastly, they said the cars powered by normally aspirated engines will be getting a 15 kilogram weight break. And just one footnote I want to add to that one is I don't know if that's a typo, because obviously the Manor and the Bicalis are both turbocharged, so I don't know if they still fall under that 15 kilogram weight break category. And the ironic thing is that if there's any cars that need a performance boost, it's those two. So it would be kind of funny to see them not get that break.
The Bicalis needs a driver boost.
Yeah, well, that too. But so I think that this is a step in the right direction, at least for now. It's a shame that we couldn't get it before Le Mans, but I think that it's pretty transparent at this point that they just wanted Toyota to get that Le Mans win. Now that that's over, they don't really care. So they're going to try to balance the cars out. So like I said, step in the right direction. I just wish it would have happened a little bit sooner.
Okay, so the thing about the WEC is I'm okay with them sacrificing Le Mans this year because it's going to be a shit show anyways. I mean, let's face it. And I'm probably the reason this thing is rated E, but anyways.
Rated E for explicit, by the way.
Yeah, explicit.
Not for everyone.
Anyways, so the reason I say that is because the privateers are going to have issues. Everybody did. I mean, Rebellion, everybody. I'm okay with that. Toyota was going to win regardless. So, you know what? Might as well let them get it out of their system. Let Fernando get his win. Get it over with. and just swallow the hard pill that Le Mans this year was terrible. So next year it sets us up for a decent battle, or at least on paper. Now, will it probably be a fantastic battle coming onto the track? No, because we've heard for years about how they're trying to balance privateers and stuff, especially back in the diesel days. It never really happened. Let's face it. Pescarolo, yeah. He literally bankrupted his business trying to catch the diesels.
It'll be a fantastic race next year when Toyota drops out before Sebring. I'm still calling that. That's going to happen.
But
Yeah,
then you'll
we'll
have
see.
Rebellion wiping the floor with everybody.
I know. That's why I'm saying it's not going to be a good race at all. My point is.
Well, actually, it might be a good race between SMP and Rebellion, though, because those two cars seem pretty well on par with each other.
Yeah, again, but SMP has a bunch of crazy Russians driving the car, and they keep wrecking it. Like, that's...
Yeah.
That's
You
the
have that
problem.
one guy who fucking managed to flip it. Then he turned his car into Thomas the Mother flipping tank engine at Le Mans.
Oh my God, Kevin.
Rip.
Kevin, what would this podcast be without you? Is all I can say. Honestly.
Boring.
Well, there you go. Shall we join the war, though? Shall we
Wartime!
get
Hold
into
on,
the
I'm never going to be able to think of the SMP car as not Thomas the Tank Engine now. It's literally got the same color scheme.
Oh my God.
Well, the
It's
reason
blue and red
Never
trim.
thought about
That's
that.
Thomas.
the reason I dumped it, that was because of when they got back going, the engine started self-destructing and started puffing smoke out the top.
In other news,
Yeah.
go to the
In
war.
other news, it's time for our battle of July 19th, 2018 regarding IMSA prototypes. Let's set this up here. On one side, we have the DPI Daytona Prototype International cars, and on the other side, we have the P2 cars. And after Watkins Glen, a race that
Pick your
David and
sides,
I
ladies.
attended in person, there were some DPI teams, not naming names, that said that
Penske!
that said we should separate the two classes, or we should separate them into two classes, because obviously having privateer P2 teams winning up against big budget factory DPI programs is not fair. So here we go. On one side again, we have Kevin. On one side, we have David, and Kyle and I will be the refs. All right, let's begin.
Okay, I agree with Penske. Well, okay, my point of view, let me set this up. I think that they should be able to have separate awards between DPI and P2, but yet they should still be able to compete with each other on track.
Everybody gets a trophy. Everybody gets a trophy. I hate this. Like, look, this is the thing that everybody bitched about at Sebring 2012, and that's why we never got to have WEC and ALMS race with each other ever again, because everybody got a trophy and everybody got shitty about it. I'm so sick of this mentality that everybody's got to get. It's funny because the people who aren't complaining about it are the people you think would be complaining about it. The privateers, the John Bennetts, whoever the rich guy who's funding AFS is. You know, you'd think those guys would be like, we're racing up against factory teams. We really need a little bit of a break. But it's not them. They're the guys who are proud to go out there and take pole positions and race up there at the front, take overall victories like we saw at Watkins Glen. And of all people, it's poor Penske. Oh, poor little Penske with your big Acura check. You're bitching about the fact that you're getting up and beat by some privateers. Sorry, weren't you guys? Didn't you guys run an experimental race at Petit Le Mans with the freaking P2 car last year? And you guys were competitive. Would you have preferred to be in the secondary class, Penske? I don't know. It's freaking stupid.
I mean, let's look at Penske's recent sports car background, though. I mean, they had a P2 car, and they could compete against much heavier factory Audis.
Yeah, and Audi bitched about that. And Penske was like, well, maybe you should try better. Well, it wasn't like ALMS until they got stupid in 2009 decided to split up the P2 cars and P1 cars. They were fine with them racing together. It produced some of the best racing
but guess
we've
what?
ever seen.
Guess what? They also had class victories. So you would have first place, P1 car. Second place would be P1 and P2.
Yeah, but nobody really considered that. Everybody pretty much considered ALMS prototype as just one class because that's what it was. And in 2010, when they let them back together, they just made it one class.
Okay,
they're like,
let me throw in here. Let me give context to what David just said. Back at 2008 Sebring, Audi lost that race to the Porsche RS Spyder Penske P2 cars overall. Audi still won in class, but they didn't consider that a win. For obvious reasons, they're not going to consider a class win when they're in the top class. If they don't finish first overall, that's not a win in their book. So I can see where you're coming at with that point right there.
Yeah, and in 2007, when Acura made their debut and Andretti Green was like one lap away from winning the race, they didn't really consider it was an achievement that they won P2, but they were second overall. And had that Audi had one falter, they would have won the race overall. They considered that a second place, not a class victory. You know what I'm saying? So it's silly to give everybody a trophy, especially when everybody, the casual race fan can even see, okay, it's really a race between all the prototypes. Why not just make it one? I'd rather have a class of 20, 21 cars versus two classes of 10. It's silly to split them up.
Here's my point of view. I think we should go back to like we had in ALMS, where pretty much you have P1 and P2 cars competing against each other. And your point actually...
We already have that!
Yes, but at the same time, though, there's some pride in saying, oh, yeah, we won the secondary class at Sebring. Not as much as winning overall. These guys are going to want to win overall.
The only difference now is is the fact that you're not handing... And they already hand a trophy to the freaking P2 guys. They have like the Truman Award for the top running P2 guy across the whole season. So I don't see what the point of that is. And besides the ACO, which, boy, we're going to get into that here in a second, because the ACO is managing to screw all this up too.
Oh, yeah, because guess what? DPI should be a fucking P1 thing.
Yeah, but you can't get a Le Mans invite if you run a DPI. You can if you run a P2. There's an advantage to running a P2 in IMSA. Well, yeah, I agree with that, but that's the ACO being stupid. That's,
Again, because the ACO, if it's not their idea, they don't like to acknowledge it.
So, Kevin... You said that they should split up the privateers and the DPI cars.
They should leave them together on track, but also at the same time only recognize the first place, not a full podium, but recognize first place in the P2s, because that gives other teams from around the world more incentive to come to IMSA if they're actually racing for something. We know for a fucking fact that the P2 cars really don't stand a chance against the DPIs at Daytona, because guess what? The DPIs are more or less designed to race at Daytona.
So I'm right in saying that you want a return of the ALMS days of like 2007, yes. 2008. Can I tell you the problem with that?
My point when he was talking about it.
Can I tell you the problem with that? The P1 cars and the P2 cars back in the ALMS days were radically different cars with different regulation sets.
And it was an open formula. It was an open formula in both classes. You could bring whatever the hell you wanted to both classes. If you wanted to build a P2 car in your freaking shed, or like John Field did with that freaking time bomb of a Lola AER, you could do it. You could bring whatever the hell you want. I mean, freaking, who was that? Autocon used to bring like a 2002 Lola to ALMS races as far up as 2008. You could run pretty much whatever. And the Radicals, let's talk about the freaking Radicals for a second. The Vanderster effort and the Eco Racing, those were freaking barnyard-built cars that were showing up because, hey, does it fit the dimensions of our rules? Does it have an engine in it that's somewhat legal? Sure, you can come run. Now we have this overly regulated bullcrap from the ACO with the P2 cars. Here's the solution. Here's what I say. It shouldn't be two classes. We shouldn't be treating it as two classes. And the BOP, which unfortunately is a thing, and I don't think it's ever going away, if you're going to BOP a class, you should BOP all of the cars in the class. Tell the ACO to go screw themselves 5 ways to sundown, and let the Riley lose some drag, let the Ligier lose some drag, maybe take some power. Yeah, but that's the ACO doing that. The IMSA should be BOPing these cars to their rules and not to the ACO's rules. And that's, I think, the contention, which I agree with, from the DPI manufacturers. They're saying, why are we being restricted because the ACO wants a certain pace out of the P2 cars and we're being balanced to the P2 cars? If you want it to be a true championship, and I think it should be, because again, this is my ultimate point, is that a 20-car class is better than two 10-car classes because it looks stronger, it's a better grid, it's less confusing to the folks watching and sitting in the grandstands watching the race. just to say, okay, all the funny-looking cars, they're all racing for the top class. And that's why, honestly, there probably should be only one GT Class 2. And by the way, IMSA, freaking give the prototypes their own unique class color, please. It's stupid to have two cars with red number panels and one with green now. It's either make them all uniform or make them all different. But anyway.
By the way, I think the universally accepted prototype class color that's not red is gray.
Oh, that would be stupid. Just make it blue. Just make it blue. But anyway,
it's P2 based. Yeah.
Yeah.
So listen, but my point comes down to this: let them race together on track. Leave them in the prototype class. Make them subclasses.
But here's the thing, though. None of the privateers are asking for this. It's only the factories. And as we found out in the past with the ALMS, with the IMSA GTP series before it, with Group 5 before that, you cannot rely on manufacturers in sports car racing. If you do, you will fail. Because as soon as those...
Look at
exactly.
WEC. They're the perfect example.
As soon as those manufacturers leave, you are screwed. You need to take care of the privateers. And right now, the privateers are saying, we don't mind the fact that our first couple of stints, we may lose a lap because we're going to have our gentleman driver in. Because we think we can race back up to the front with our shoes. So you look at a Core Autosport, and Chris and I were watching at Watkins Glen. John Bennett was so far behind the field it looked like they had no chance. But 6 hours later, suddenly Romain Dumas is slicing through the field, racing up to the front. That's very exciting racing, and the P2 guys are perfectly fine with it being that way. The only people who aren't are the Penske's and the Wayne Taylors, who for some reason think that it would be better if it's a 6 to 8 car class, where really it's just Acura versus Cadillac, because the Mazdas will blow up and the ESM cars will crash. So it's like, I don't know. I don't like this style of racing. It annoys me how overly regulated it is. I wish anybody could just go out and build a DPI car. I think that would solve a lot of the problems right now. I wish you could take the Dallara SMP P1 chassis, stick something in the back of it. It doesn't even matter what it is. If you want to go find a Briggs & Stratton motor and stick it in the back, go for it. It's like
way to promote your engine.
Well, they don't pay me anything. So, but my point is, like, if you want to make a barnyard special, you should be able to do it. And right now, it's so overly regulated that we're just seeing everybody want it more regulated because they're like, well, we've already got all these regulations in place. Might as well split the classes up. And I'm like, no. This is the most healthy prototype racing has been in the United States in 30 years. And we want to change the formula because Penske came in and got triggered. They were getting beat by privateers. It's just asking for trouble.
Okay,
we're one economic crash away from them all leaving.
Quickly though, David hinted on this earlier that the privateer P2 cars shouldn't be restricted to the spec Gibson engine. I mean, you've pretty much said that since the beginning.
And they
Kevin
should
agrees.
Listen,
and they
shouldn't dive in on this point. The way to fix this is do away with this global spec bullshit that the FIA rolled out. Listen to me. It's done nothing but, it's done some good, but not that much. Yes,
it's done more damage than good, I think.
I agree with you, because guess what? Yeah, it forced the team or the manufacturers to evolve their cars, but the reason that they went to this spec, only having 4 manufacturers, is to force the oddballs like BR Engineering, who actually were mildly successful. They finished on the podium at Le Mans in P2. That forces them to P1. That forces, all these other random manufacturers over to P1 who would have been in P2, the stronger class. And P2 has thinned out in global spec racing, but yet they're pretty damn strong in IMSA.
Okay, but this is, again, you're playing into my point. I think really what we're talking about here is that I don't think at this point in racing anymore, having 2 classes and one kind of restricted because you have to protect gentleman drivers, or this idea that you have to protect gentleman drivers, it's outdated now. I think most gentleman drivers want to go race. They don't care if they're slower than Juan Pablo Montoya. I think 99.99% of the people in the world are slower than Juan Pablo Montoya on a racetrack. And these people are racers. They understand that. But they want to race Juan Pablo Montoya. And if they can beat Juan Pablo Montoya, who's driving for Penske with huge factory money behind him, are you kidding me?
TT cars off the track left and right.
Well, yeah, but my point is, are you kidding me? Like, that is the coolest thing ever. I think, and this goes for WEC as well, I think 2 prototype classes is an outdated formula now. I think you need to go with a streamlined, I don't want to say dumbed down, but I think you need to make it so that LMP1 is something kind of like on an IndyCar. I think I've even said this on this podcast before. You need to get LMP1 down to IndyCar budgets levels, and you could have 20 cars in the WEC and you could have 20 in IMSA. I think you could do that, especially with the amount of gentleman driver funding that is in both series. But you need to make that choice. I think you need to get it down to one, and especially with WEC, I think it needs to be 1 prototype class, 1 GT class, get rid of all the AM crap, and just go racing.
I will say this, though. I mean, the whole inception of this argument comes from the basis of the FIA rejected DPI as a format that they would recognize. And IMSA, with open arms, accepted P2s because they realized that a bulk of their class would be the global spec P2 cars.
Yes, but my problem with that is it's not the fact that they accepted the global spec cars or even used the global spec cars as a basis. It's the fact that they are they have self-imposed restrictions on themselves to keep with the ACO BOP for those P2 cars when it's obvious that the BOP is absolute dog shit and it only benefits the French-built cars. Screw the American-Canadian effort because that Riley is complete crap without some BOP. And the Dallara is just as bad until it gets Cadillac Aero and the Cadillac engine, which actually gives it some help. And essentially,
lot of help.
It's politicized, and it shouldn't be. And this is the problem. IMSA could do a better job policing this. Are they perfect? Hell no. Look at all the complaining about the GTLM BOP. But why don't they use the ACO BOP for GTLM? Why are they cucked on one side and not cucked on the other? I do not understand it.
Well, this is the one point I wanted to add is that the global spec P2s in IMSA, they don't want to touch those cars because they're under the impression that, hey, if we leave these cars at the exact same spec that they are in WEC, there's a better chance that they'll make a crossover to Le Mans. And I guess that's pretty much the ACO on that side saying, hey, can you leave these guys alone? IMSA saying, yeah, we'll do that. But
how many IMSA teams?
Yeah, that's my point. How many IMSA teams in the past, this is the second year with the new regulations, I don't think we've seen any team cross over from IMSA to Le Mans yet.
JDC turned their invites down. They said, nah, no thanks.
Yeah, so it doesn't make any sense. And more importantly, if you want to stick with the Gibson engine in your global spec P2 car in IMSA, you should have the choice to do that. But if you have absolutely no interest in going to Le Mans, you think it's too much money, you just want to stick stateside, that's fine. And you should have the choice, like you said, to throw a manufacturer engine in there and add some diversity to it.
Well, here's why that won't happen. It's what I brought up earlier. The fact that IMSA, and IndyCar does this too, which I hate, is that they require, if you have an engine that's not a Gibson, you have to provide some sort of advertising dollars to the broadcasts and outside of IMSA. You have to sponsor a race too. It's ridiculous. It's money grubbing, and ultimately it hurts the sport, in my opinion, to do that sort of thing. Because if you want to talk about IndyCar, just real quick, Cosworth cannot supply engines to teams because they don't have a manufacturer associated with them. And because IndyCar's product isn't selling that great right now, they can't find a manufacturer to associate with that engine, so they can't build it and sell it. It's ridiculous.
I think I don't know. I think we've gone over quite a bit here. That was a good 20 minutes. So moving on to the last thing of this episode. I said I wanted to keep this 45 minutes. We're over an hour into it. Seems like the common trend with this podcast. But the last thing, and I want to keep this pretty short, because David, you already made a video on it. In fact, I'm going to put that on a card at the top right so you can see more in-depth review of that race. But IndyCar at Toronto, yeah, it was a good race, I'd say.
Scott Dixon won. I'm happy.
Yeah, Marco Andretti's fuel at the end. That was good.
That's your recap. It was a good race.
It was a good race. It was a good race. There were some questionable moves. I think, Kyle, you're going to talk about those a little bit more here.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
Okay.
Rahal and his brakes, man.
Here
I
we
swear.
go.
Oh, it wasn't his brakes. It was he ran over a bunch of clag, and they decided, I'm going to send it up
What
the
are
inside
you,
of
Dave
Max
Cox?
Chilton.
Well, here's the thing. You watch the onboard. There was a car in front of him that went straight right, and then Chilton was just slowing up into that corner really quickly.
Chilton was slowing down for the corner, and Rahal was not.
Dude, he was slow. But Chilton was braking way too early. Like, come on.
Was he?
And then, well, then you got to look at the fact that Rahal wasn't even in the racing line trying to get back into the field, and he just got punterinoed by.
Okay, so he
Ray.
wasn't in the racing line. He got in the marbles, and he decided, you know what? I'm just going to turn in front of.
No, I'm not even talking about
Ryan
the brakes
Hunter.
anymore. I'm talking about when he got hit.
No,
then,
he turned. He clearly turned across somebody. It's like he tried to drive underneath.
I think it was on the outside of he was literally by the tires, and he tried to turn back, and he had literally nowhere else to go.
No.
Oh, and I love how of everything in IndyCar he got penalized. Like out of everything that happens that gets warnings, or not even warnings, just doesn't get penalized in IndyCar, that got penalized.
Yeah,
And I'm not saying it wasn't worth a penalty. I'm just saying it's inconsistent.
Well, that's something I've called out like the whole season is like the only place the officiating has been bad has been on the street courses this year. Like they get IndyCar drivers are getting away with so much contact on the street courses. It's unbelievable to me.
And Pagenaud turning dead left on Wickens was one of the most awful moves I've ever seen, and it should have been a penalty. The contact was just like how Wickens said it. The contact was fine the whole time, but then that last move where Pagenaud literally turned to the left to hit Wickens, and Wickens had to lock up to not hit the wall. That was dirty, and that deserves a penalty. That was awful.
They've been doing that at Toronto forever, though. I mean, if they should have been calling that back in '97 if they were going to start calling that one.
It's still worth a penalty. That was one of the most dirty moves I've ever seen, especially from a guy like Pagenaud.
People have been doing a freaking Elio did that to Paul Tracy in 2009.
Again, that's Elio. I would expect a penalty from Elio. And plus, that's another thing, too. I would expect that from Elio. I don't really expect that from Pagenaud.
Anyway, so just wrapping this up, Kyle, last episode you and I talked about how Dixon had like a 33 or something point lead very subtly in the championship. Well, now it's a 62-point lead going into what I still consider one of his strongest suits of the season, which is Mid-Ohio. Of course, you'll be there. I believe Kevin will be there too.
Yep.
So, yeah.
The only thing I'll say is Mid-Ohio, I don't know if David would agree or disagree with this, but I think Mid-Ohio is going to set the championship. Just because after
it's gonna give it to Dixon is what it's gonna do.
Here's the thing: it's Dixon's best race, really. I mean, and there's 4 to go, and usually after Mid Ohio is when we see whether the points are gonna be close or it's gonna be a runaway. So if Dixon chokes at Mid Ohio and comes out, the points are close, then we're gonna have a fight. If he leaves with that 60-point gap still, then Dixon's gonna run away with it. Because after this, I don't think there's much time for anyone to catch up to him if he doesn't choke in Ohio.
Newgarden's good at Pocono and Gateway. So
yes, but to make up a 60-point gap in 4 races is tough.
You're right. It's either it's either going to be a championship fight after Mid-Ohio, or it's going to be the Dixon commencement ceremony over the next 4 races.
All I'll say about Mid-Ohio and Dixon is he hasn't won there since 14, and I don't even think he's been on the podium since then. I think he's
Arrow kits.
He's had 2 or 3 outside the touch ends, and Penske has dominated there. So if Newgarden's going to show, Rahal won there with an arrow kit. I mean, anyone.
But no, he got lucky on pit strategy though. Wasn't Dixon going to win anyway? But then Karam spun out. I believe that was.
Listen, Kyle. Here's the point though that Dave was trying to make. The last time that Dixon won there was the last time we had.
It was a fuel
universal
strategy race,
aero
and Mike
kit.
Cole won the race.
It was a spec aero kit then. That's where Dixon shines. When everybody's got the same thing as Scott Dixon's going to drive it better than you.
Here's the thing about Mid-Ohio. Dixon doesn't drive Mid-Ohio any more special than anyone else. The thing about Mid-Ohio is it's such a fuel strategy race and such a parade that Mike Cole plays the race.
That's Dixon
why
driving.
Dixon wins it. That's why Dixon wins that race, because he's got Mike Cole in the box.
What the hell do you think fuel saving is? It's
Dude,
driving.
Mike Cole doesn't tell Scott Dixon, okay, I need you to do this right now.
Mike Cole,
Dixon knows.
No, Mike Cole gives him a number. He says, Scott, we need this number. And then Dixon does it.
Yeah, Dixon.
Marco got a number at Toronto, and he didn't hit it. So there's your...
No, they didn't fill the car up full enough.
Are we sure about that?
Yeah.
Which happens to be the
That's what
curse
Brian
of the
Hurta said.
98.
That's what Brian Hurta said. That was confirmed.
Oh, okay. Fair enough.
The
They're
curse
just
of the 98
incompetent
is always
then.
fueling issues.
That's true. Right. So am I correct in saying that that's a wrap on this one?
Yeah.
Yeah, hold on. I just want to. I want to
no.
make one more point about this. Are you kidding me? Saying that saving fuel isn't driving the car? Are you kidding me? That is all driver. That is all driver.
Yeah, but figuring out the fuel mileage and when to pit and getting lucky on it, that's
not getting lucky. Literally, if that race goes green to the end, Dixon can start sixth like he did at Road America and just pass everybody because he makes up a whole lap on fuel.
Cool.
I'm not saying Dixon's a bad driver. I'm just saying that
stop.
Dixon doesn't drive Mid-Ohio any better than anyone else.
Listen,
But he does. He saves fuel.
I'm
Because
going
that's
to
the race
reinforce
that
He
Mid-Ohio
goes
is.
as fast
But he
as
does.
everybody else and can run 1 to 2
In a
laps
flat-out
longer
race,
than everybody
Dixon
else.
is not special at Mid-Ohio.
guys.
Mark my
But he
word.
is.
He
But he
isn't.
is.
Dude, you've said repeatedly how Dixon's gonna fucking run away with it because he's amazing at Mid-Ohio. You've said that so many times.
You can't contradict yourself. I will not accept this. And you can't say that not saving fuel is not driving better than everybody else.
Well, of course I can't say that he's not good at Mid-Ohio. You can't ignore 4 wins.
Listen,
But you're
Kyle,
ignoring. You're saying saving fuel is Mike Hull. Mike Hull's just giving him the number. He's doing math on the pit box. That's all he's doing. Scott Dixon's driving the damn thing.
how did Scott Dixon win his last championship in 2015?
Luck.
He won Sonoma.
How did he win Sonoma?
Double points.
Double points. Yeah.
But how did he win that race?
Because Montoya's a fucking idiot.
And
Yeah.
also
And he
fuel
crashed.
mileage.
Yeah, but freaking Will Power and Montoya are like Dumb and Dumber, and they ran into each other for no reason. And
I fucking died laughing at that. Too.
yeah.
Listen, Dixon, he is great at saving fuel, and that's why he's so successful. And when it comes down to it at Mid-Ohio, he's going to do it again. And Ray Hall's going to fucking wreck again.
Now you're just saying that to just fucking be a dick.
Hey, you know, if Ray Hall can
I
qualify,
could have just said that Dixon's going to wreck, but I didn't.
Ray Hall needs to stop
But
qualifying.
Dixon doesn't wreck.
Uh-oh. Now you're... One car airborne!
Oh, no. This is getting out
That
of
wasn't
hand.
his fault.
We need to get Jay Howard in. We need a crowdfund right now. We need to get Jay Howard in Mid-Ohio.
No. This episode is over.
It is. All right. Because, yeah, I'm going to call it on that one. So, I'm going to link these 3 clowns, all their channels at the top right on YouTube. If you're listening to it on iTunes or Google Play, whatever format.
And be sure to donate on
Kevin
Patreon.
Rollins, Kyle Cuthbertson, David Land. You should probably know them all. All right. Anyway, that's going to wrap it up for this one. You can follow us on Twitter at Rain Race Podcast. And if you have any questions for future episodes, you can use hashtag AskTRRP. We'll answer them in future episodes.
I have a question for us.
I'm not going to answer it right now.
Why do we keep having these clowns on the show, including myself?
Because you make it interesting. But to a certain extent, you
shit.
need to
You make it longer, though,
stop
at the same
talking.
time.
Right?
Okay,
And
goodbye.
it's time for all of us to stop talking right now. Hope you enjoyed this episode, and we'll catch you in the next one.